Okay. Good morning. Let me just make sure. Let me make sure that there we go. Now I see some recording happening. Let me get us going here. So hello, we're going to start chapter 29 today, which is on the evolution and diversity of fungi. So the fungi are a very diverse group, and as we go through the different groups of fungi, you might wonder, my goodness, they're so different. What is it that actually unites them and causes to put them together? And there are a couple answers to that. One is that they all have a material called chitin in their cell walls. So this chitin, you might remember from learning about in 1406, it's a type of carbohydrate that is modified with some different chemical groups to give it different properties. So they all have this chitin in their cell walls. Also, all of them are what we would refer to as absorptive heterotrophs, which means that they secrete digestive enzymes outside of their body into the environment. And while outside of their body, these enzymes break down large organic molecules into smaller molecules that can be readily absorbed through the cell membrane of the fungi. Now, there are some fungi that use living tissues to do this, and when that is the case, we would call them parasites, predators, or even in some case mutualists, and we'll talk about examples of each. But most fungi actually do this on dead tissues. Most fungi use dead tissues and break down the organic molecules into smaller molecules and then absorb those. And we would call these saprobes or saprophobic fungi that do this. So let's talk a little bit about the evolutionary history of fungi before we get into each of the groups and their characters. So DNA evidence and paleontological evidence indicate fungi evolved from an aquatic, single-celled, flagellated protist. Oh my goodness, what a mess. Okay, it didn't erase as clean as I'd hoped. So the common ancestor was an aquatic, single-celled protist. And an early lineage of the fungi, and let me get my little pointer tool out here. So an early lineage of fungi called the chytrids, right here, actually retain this form. They are aquatic, they are unicellular, and they have flagella. So a group called the nuclearids are hypothesized to be the closest protist relative of fungi, and here is an example of one. And if we look here down here at this phylogeny, you might recognize this. This is a piece of that protist phylogeny we talked about in chapter 26. The fungi, along with their protist relative, the nuclearids, and along with animals, are in a group called the opisthecons. It's a monophyletic clade, so it's in a group called which is a monophyletic clade that includes fungi, animals, and their protist relatives. And we'll talk a little bit about animals next time, but today we're gonna focus on the fungi. So we break the fungi. We're going to be talking about 6 fungal groups. Sorry, I had to count them. 6 fungal groups, and a couple of these groups, the chytrids and the zygomycota, are paraphyletic, and that's what these. Whenever you see a dashed line in a phylogeny, it kind of indicates, all right, there's something going on here that we're not 100% sure of, that isn't completely resolved, and we need to still refine and figure out. So let's talk a little bit about the general structure of the fungal body. So there are 2 common growth forms of the fungal body. There are what we call the yeasts. So the yeast growth form is a unicellular and free-living fungi. So yeast is kind of a general term for these single-celled fungi. And there are a few that fall in this category, and so here's an example of a yeast. But the majority of fungi, I'll try to pluralize correctly, form what we call multicellular, or are multicellular, and they form multicellular filaments. So these multicellular filaments are known as hyphae, and they are these either completely microscopic or just very small filaments that grow through the soil and form an interwoven mat. That we call the mycelium. So here is an example of a mycelium, this interwoven mat of hyphae. So each of these threads, each thread is a hyphae, and they form the interwoven mat called the mycelium. So here's an example of a mycelium, a big, huge chunk of mycelium in the soil. So again, all fungi have cell wall made of chitin, and this chitin is very strong but flexible. Again, it's a polysaccharide that is modified with nitrogen groups, and we find this not only in fungi but also in the exoskeleton of many arthropods, which is an animal group we'll talk about later. So the mycelium, let's talk about this just a little bit more. There's my eraser. So the mycelium, what is it good for? It increases surface area. Big time. So 1 centimeter cubed of soil can contain 1 kilometer of hyphae. Right, like if we stretch the hyphae out. That's a lot. So this increased surface area allows it to absorb more nutrients and water. It is excellent. Fungi are excellent at doing this. So these hyphae take on 2 general forms. There are what we call the septate hyphae. And septate hyphae have cross walls, known as septa. Think of the septum in between your nostrils. That section off portions of the hyphae. So we have, so here's an example of one of those septa here. We also have what are called coincidic hyphae. These are hyphae that lack septa. So they're essentially one mass of cytoplasm that could have hundreds or thousands of nuclei. So one thing, I forgot to mention about the septate hyphae, is that they have pores. And you can kind of see the pores. So there's one of those pores. And those pores are actually large enough for many organelles and cytoplasm to get through. Not typically the nucleus, but certainly lots of other cellular components and nutrients, probably most importantly, can easily pass through those pores. So these cells are very interconnected with each other. And anyway, so here's the coencytic hyphae, and as you can see, there's no cross walls of any type. We basically just have one continuous cytoplasm with many, many nuclei. And this results from many rounds of mitosis that is not followed by cytokinesis. So fungi have a tremendous amount of important ecological roles. And probably one of the most critical is that of being a decomposer. Oh, that pen is terrible. Let me change pens. As I mentioned, most fungi get their nutrients from dead tissue, so they're really, really important in nutrient cycles in ecosystems. So they play a really important role in breaking down tissue and returning things to abiotic pools such as the soil. We also have fungi that act as parasites. So that's another kind of ecological role we see of fungi taking. So some are getting their nutrients from living tissue as a parasite. So most are going to be on plants, but there will be some on insects and even a few on animals. And a great example of that is the fungi that causes athlete's foot. So if you get athlete's foot, you are being parasitized by a fungus. So many fungi, particularly those that are parasitizing plants, and that's what you're looking at here in this image. So see these fungal spores, and we'll talk about exactly what a spore is later, but this spore is sending down, germinating its hyphae, and these hyphae are actually penetrating into the tissue of the leaf. Here we see a hyphae actually entering through a pore in the leaf known as a stomata, so it's actually coming in and getting right into the tissue, and even, if we look here, even into the cells. See how that hyphae has penetrated the plant cell? And, oh, here's a close-up view of it. That hyphae has penetrated the plant cell and formed this little branching structure. That branching structure is called a haustoria. A haustoria is a branching projection that pushes through cell walls into living plant tissue, or into living plant cells. And the whole reason it wants to do this, to absorb nutrients. It's going to pull nutrients right out of that cell. So a pretty cool adaptation to allow it to parasitize this plant. And here's some more images of fungal parasites. So we see fungi acting as parasites on animals such as humans. Oh boy, that's a bad one. We see them as parasites on crops. That's really common. Rye, potatoes, corn, wheat. Lots of our agricultural crops are vulnerable to fungal parasites and are actually a big, can be a big problem in maintaining agricultural yields and having feet that don't hurt a lot. Another interesting ecological role that fungi take is as a predator. So, and this is probably a little more unusual. So predatory fungi have adaptations to capture prey, such as looped hyphae they can use as snares, which is what you're looking at here. So you're seeing a nematode, which is a very small animal we'll learn about later in the semester. And this hyphae of this fungus has these adaptations, these little ring-like structures that it actually can use to catch this nematode and clamp onto it and actually then secrete enzymes and digest the animal and suck up the nematode broth and get its nutrients that way. Other predatory fungi use sticky substances to trap prey. And don't worry, guys, you have to be pretty small in order to fall victim to a predatory fungus, so you're probably pretty safe. But everybody gets athlete's foot, so that's probably going to happen. Even I get athlete's foot, and I'm not an athlete, trust me. Okay, another ecological role of fungi is as a mutualist. And one really cool manifestation of mutualism between fungi and other species is in the form of something we call a lichen. And why do I keep reaching for this pen that doesn't work? I'm throwing it far away so that doesn't happen. A lichen. So a lichen is a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and a photosynthetic partner. The photosynthetic partner could either be an algae or a cyanobacterium. And most often, what's going to happen, in fact always, what's going to happen is that the photosynthetic partner is going to provide the products of photosynthesis. And you can see here, so the brown here, let me get to my more obvious pointer. The sort of tan colored here, that is the hyphae of the fungus. And then the little green dots, those are the algal partner. That's the algae that is sort of living within the fungal hyphae. So it's actually an endosymbiotic relationship. The algae lives inside the fungus. So the algae is providing the products of photosynthesis, you know, the sugars that come from photosynthesis. So the fungus benefits from that. The fungus is providing protection. The fungus is also excellent at absorbing water and nutrients because of that large surface area. And so it can provide that in turn. So it's a mutualism. They're both benefiting from this relationship. So typically you have millions of photosynthetic cells suspended within the fungal layer. The kind of cool thing about lichens, besides everything, is that the merger between these organisms is so complete that they actually are given their own scientific name as if they were one organism. And we're going to look at 3 different growth forms in lab of lichens. There's what we call the crustose lichen. I know it looks like there's like this rock has just kind of got some crud on it. Well, you're actually looking at a lichen. That's what that rusty color is. A crustose lichen grows very, very close to its surface, in this case the rock. Almost looks like it's spray painted on. We have what are called foliose lichens that have this lobed, sort of leaf-like morphology. And then we have this fruticose lichen, which has kind of this branching morphology. Sometimes they call it shrub-like. So we'll look at examples of all of these. And in fact, if you want to see these right now, walk outside, find a tree branch. You'll probably see lichens on it, or find a rock. They're everywhere. Another type of mutualist, a mutualistic relationship we see fungi participating in, is as mycorrhizae. So this is a symbiotic relationship with a plant to exchange nutrients. And we are taking advantage, again, of those haustoria. But this time the haustoria, they still extend into the plant cell. Sorry, that looks like one word. Extend into the plant cell to exchange nutrients. So it's not just taking, it's giving too. So we will most often find these mycorrhizae in association with the cells of plant roots. And again, what the plant is obviously giving is the products of photosynthesis, right? So the sugars they make. But instead of the fungi just taking this and being like, haha, it actually will give the plant things. So these fungi are really excellent at obtaining water and nutrients from the soil because of their great surface area. Also, fungi are just better at obtaining certain nutrients from the soil, notably phosphorus, and so it will deliver these things to the plant. And there are many, many plants that actually cannot even germinate unless they are inoculated with the correct type of fungi, because they've become, over evolutionary time, they've basically become dependent on these hyphae of the fungi to increase the surface area of their roots. So these are really, really important to plants. Now there are 2 types of mycorrhizae we see. There are what we call ectomycorrhizal fungi. And this is where instead of the hyphae actually penetrating the plant cells, it forms a sheath. So it doesn't actually penetrate the root cells. So what you're seeing here, and ecto means outside, so the fungal hyphae have formed a sheath around this root, and they might penetrate in between the spaces between the cells, but they're not actually getting into the cells. And that is in contrast to what we would call endomycorrhizal fungi. So an endomycorrhizal fungi, endo meaning inside, actually extend their hyphae through the cell wall and into invaginations of the cell plasma membrane. Another word for these, another term for these that you'll see in your book are arbuscular mycorrhizae. Arbuscular, so that's, think arbor, think tree. They're referring to the fact that, so this hyphae has penetrated and pushed into invaginations of the actual cell plasma membrane, and so it gets that name arbuscular because it kind of looks like a little tree. These little, and this is the Hostoria. This is a scanning electron micrograph where they pulled out, it's kind of a cool micrograph, they have pulled out the cytoplasm of the cell so you can see what you're looking at, and so what you're seeing here is the cell wall of the plant. That's what this honeycomb looking structure is, and then we've got the actual Hostoria, which is pushed its way through the cell wall and actually making contact with the cell. So an endo, that word endo means inside, by the way. Okay, I'm going to end this here. Let me actually just put my little, what I said. All right, I'm going to end here and pick up with this slide where we're actually going to talk about some of the different groups of fungi. So I will see you soon.